The United States again pledged its ironclad commitment to defend the Philippines, with U.S. Defense Chief Lloyd Austin even telling President Marcos that we will always have your back. The two nations have also finally released their bilateral defense guidelines outlining the alliance's priorities. We'll discuss this some more with One News Defense Editor Manny Magato later on in the program.
Now, if you think the hot weather is already affecting you, farmers are seemingly having it worse. Aside from the heat, the lack of rainfall is also a cause for concern for farmers now as their lands are getting too dry, rendering them unable to plant crops. Farmers are now appealing to government to step in.
And COVID-19 cases have gone up in the last couple of days. The DOH says there is no need to raise an alarm over the uptick. So what should we be doing instead? Welcome to the show. I'm Chicky Verhel.
I'm Riza Diaz.
And I'm Sean Yao. All right, we will always have your back. From you are the best partner to that. So that sounds very much like something you would say to a partner or a very close friend, right? But, diba? I got your back. But it's usually it's actually what the U.S. Defense Secretary told President Bongbong Marcos during a meeting at the Pentagon.
Yes, and Sean and Riza, this comes just days after U.S. President Biden himself also told Marcos that there's no better partner for them than the Philippines. Nakakakilig, di ba?
I don't know who writes these lines.
Okay, Sean, Chicky, please enlighten myself. What does the U.S. Defense Chief actually, Lloyd Austin meant when he said, "We got your back"? What was he referring to?
Nga. All right, so that we might have missed some parts of that quote, Riza. The full quote actually reads, "We will always have your back in the South China Sea or elsewhere in the region." So no more doubts there, right? This very much sounds like the U.S. reiterating its commitment to defending the Philippines with the backdrop of China's continued aggression in the disputed waters. But just when you think the Philippines and the U.S. could not get any closer, before that meeting, Marcos was actually given full military honors at the Pentagon. He also trooped the lines at the grounds of the U.S. Department of Defense. Then, during that meeting, Austin told Marcos that the Philippines and the U.S. are more than just allies, but are actually family. Let's hear it straight from the U.S. Defense Secretary.
So make no mistake, Mr. President, we will always have your back in the South China Sea or elsewhere in the region. We're more than allies, we're family. And we share a common vision for a free and open Indo-Pacific because a region governed by rules and rights helps provide security and prosperity for our two countries and for the whole region.
Klaro na ba?
Ayun naman pala.
Hindi naman pala sweet words.
Right.
More of family na daw, di ba, Sean and Riza? So sana, when the time comes, no, na-acquire natin yung assets, kasi di ba, meron binigay sa atin, pero old, that's what Sean and Gretchen and I were talking about last night. Sana kung yung mga bagong assets na acquire natin, sana din, pampamilya yung price. Hindi lang pangkaibigan.
Right. Nice. All right, now moving on. President Marcos actually made history as the first foreign head of state to be given full honors at the Pentagon under the Biden administration. Let's get more details on Marcos's meeting with U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin with Julie Baisa, who's currently in Washington. Julie.
Riza, during his meeting with Austin, Marcos cited the importance of continued cooperation and commitment of the two countries. Marcos says the relationship of the nations must be strengthened as the Philippines faces, quote, challenges it has not faced before. Also released during the meeting were the bilateral defense guidelines to modernize the alliance cooperation of the two countries, which was established by Austin and Philippine Defense Chief Carlito Galvez Jr. The guidelines reaffirm the relevance of the U.S.-Philippines Mutual Defense Treaty in addressing both current and emerging threats. Riza?
Thank you. That was Julie Baisa reporting from Washington.
So, what exactly are included in these bilateral defense guidelines released by the United States and the Philippines? Here's what we know. A readout from the Pentagon says that the leaders' discussion reaffirmed the United States and the Philippines' enduring commitment to stand shoulder to shoulder as allies. That is, to bring greater security, prosperity, and stability to the Indo-Pacific region and beyond. Priorities detailed in the 6-page document include enhanced coordination and bilateral planning. The updated guidelines also now specifically mention that mutual defense commitments would be invoked if ever there is an armed attack on either country anywhere in the South China Sea. Another addition specifies that Coast Guard vessels are among those protected. It also mentions the need to work together considering asymmetric, hybrid, and irregular warfare and gray zone tactics. Now, this phrase, gray zone tactics, is often used to describe China's use of its Coast Guard and fleet of fishing vessels in the South China Sea. The two countries also agreed to expand their information sharing efforts, especially on principal threats and challenges confronting the alliance. The defense guidelines also aim to modernize the Philippines' defense capabilities. That's via close coordination on the Philippines' defense budget planning and the development of a security sector assistance roadmap. The two nations likewise agreed to combat transnational and non-conventional threats by, among other things, improving cyber defense and security cooperation.
Joining us for a discussion on the bilateral defense guidelines is One News's defense editor, Manny Mogato. Good evening.
Good evening, good evening. Welcome
Manny.
back here.
I know. I'm guessing we'll have you a lot here
Yeah.
as these developments progress.
Right.
So, what did you think about these bilateral security guidelines? It's a lot of jargon, but can you unpack that for us, Manny?
This is a very significant agreement between the Philippines and the United States. No? A week ago, before President Marcos went to Washington, he said that he will try to raise the MDT, or the Mutual Defense Treaty, for a review with the U.S. government. Because the treaty was signed in 1951, so it has to be updated. No? But he did not get what he wanted. Instead, he got these bilateral guidelines. But it is better because it spelled out clearly what the U.S. will do in case of a crisis. If you recall, the 1951 MDT, it only covers the metropolitan areas or the territories of the Philippines in its very limited coverage. No? Hindi kasama yung disputed areas in the South China Sea. But these guidelines specifically said that any attack in the Pacific, including the South China Sea, anywhere will be covered. So
On
maganda
top
yun.
of that, specifically Coast Guard vessels. So what does this mean? Of course, I think by now everyone has heard about the Coast Guard's aggression in the past week or in the last week of April in the South China Sea. This was well documented by journalists and I think broadcast all over. So what happens the next time that, a Coast Guard vessel from China tries these dangerous maneuvers on a Philippine Coast Guard vessel? What can we expect?
Well, you were saying earlier that China is employing gray zone tactics, no? Yung pagbangga nila o pang-intimidate, panakot sa ating Coast Guard is part of the gray zone tactics, no? They will not attack it because that will be a trigger for the MDT. No? So, tinatakot lang tayo. They are trying to provoke us, tayo mauna. But we will do that. We will not do that.
So, may relevance ba yung timing? Because we know that China has been very aggressive on their positioning in the West Philippine Sea since 2014. But why just now that we're hearing these things from the United States?
Well, it's a realization from the United States that China is a rising power and the competition between the US and the China is heating up. No? During Obama's time, during the presidency of Benigno Aquino, the Americans abandoned us when we had a standoff at Scarborough Shoal. No? They do not want to get involved. But this time, very explicit that they said that they will try to respond in case of another incident.
Yeah, Sir Manny, the MDT, the Mutual Defense Treaty calls on both nations to support each other if an external party attacks the Philippines or the U.S., diba? So should the U.S. call for our help, say if a conflict between them and China arises, what will be our response?
Well, it's not automatic, no? Because the Philippine Congress will have to vote whether we will go to war against another country or not. In the same way that the American Congress will also have to vote in case they will go to war in defense of the Philippines. So it's not automatic. But if the shooting starts, who can stop it?
Okay. So, again, this avoidance of going to war, it can only be stopped by Congress? Or is there, I don't think at this moment we are quite ready to go to war, even with the promises of a backup or someone's got our back. And even with the pending arrival of all these watercraft and aircraft from the United States. So what happens now? Pwede ba tayong umatras dyan?
Oo.
Or yung Congress lang yung makakagawa nun?
No, because whether we like it or not, even with the U.S. or presence is here or not, we will be affected by any conflict in the Taiwan Straits because it is very near the Philippines, no? It's about 80 kilometers from Batanes to Taiwan. And normally, the Chinese, if they will have to invade Taiwan, they will pass through the Basi Channel, no? So it's in the north of our country, and they will try to control it, close it, the airspace and the maritime space, so we will be affected.
Is that
With the
why?
U.S. or without the U.S. here.
So is that why, Manny, that the U.S. is so adamant about pursuing additional EDCA sites that are not fronting the West Philippine Sea, but rather north of the country?
Yes, because Cagayan is very close to Taiwan, and from that area, they can conduct sea control and sea denial to prevent China from making adventurous maneuvers in Taiwan.
Okay, we're about to wrap up, but we just want to we just want to hear your take on that statement again. We got your back, by the U.S. Defense Secretary when he said that. That made quite a headline today. Manny, does America really have our backs when it comes to, of course, the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement?
Magandang pakinggan, di ba?
Yeah.
Okay.
But-
Very sweet.
But we really don't know if that can happen or not. Kasi hindi pa nasubukan eh. No?
Right, so-
We still don't know. I think a war in Taiwan is not happening.
Possible
Because-
kaya naparinig to sa China? All these strong statements, of course, is
Right.
getting a lot of airtime.
Right.
Because China will not go to war against the U.S. and the U.S. will not go to war against China. Pag nangyari yan, it's a catastrophe, it's a disaster for the world. Eh yung sa Ukraine lang, matindi ng food and energy crisis, no?
Right.
Eh China pa kaya. China and the U.S. are the two largest economies in the world.
That's true.
So, delikado. Baka wala ng mundo.
Oo. Well, a partnership, most of the time, hindi equal. Very quickly lang, yes or no? Sino mas nakikinabang, US or tayo?
U.S.
Thank you for joining us, One News' defense editor, Manny Mogato. Here's another hot issue. With the El Nino and increasing heat, farmlands are also affected. Kamusta naman kaya ang ating mga magsasaka? As you guys know, last Tuesday, Pag-asa raised the El Nino alert. This means that when El Nino hits, there will be less rainfall in affected areas. And one of the severe impacts of this will be on the crops of our farmers. In addition, the National Water Resources Board plans to suspend the flow of water to irrigation starting on May 11. Farmers are already worried about the effects of this as crops, which rely on irrigation water, were only recently planted. Let's hear what they had to say.
Kung wala ng tubig na makukuha, malalantay yun. Mamamatay din. Sayang yun. Yun ang walang kikitain. Lugi. Ang problema lang namin talaga, pagdating ng anihan, ang presyo ng palay mababa. Yun lang walang ganong kinikita ang magsasaka.
Hindi naman lahat nakakatanggap ng benepisyo ng gobyerno. Katulad ng mga sinasabing ayu-ayuda, hindi naman nakakarating sa amin.
With the looming El Nino, farmers and other groups are reportedly seeking assistance from the government. Let's bring in mobile journalist Francis Orsho for the details. Francis.
Sean, that's right. Groups are now calling on the national government to grant much-needed production subsidies for small-scale farmers and even fishermen amid the looming El Nino. The Kilusang Magbubukid ng Pilipinas said the subsidy will help workers in the sector amid production challenges with the expected onset of the weather phenomenon. Aside from cash aid, the KMP is also appealing for water for irrigation and seeds for their crops. Sean?
Thanks for that, mobile journalist Francis Orsio. Okay, so mukhang magkakatotoo na talaga tong El Nino. Ang taas na nung chances of it happening. And the problems though of the farming sector, I think we all know na nothing new, di ba? Mas medyo na-aggravate lang kasi, scary, magkaka-El Nino na. Ano na magyayari sa atin?
Yeah, interestingly, in another show, we were interviewing SINAG president, Mr. Rosendo So, kanina. We were actually asking him, with all these issues surrounding or hounding the agriculture department, di ba? Meron yung mga storage facilities na kulang, yung production na mababa, tapos ito nga yung water shortage. Sabi niya, well, it seems like President Marcos is actually doing an okay job. Okay naman daw yung direction. So he didn't really have any suggestions on an agriculture secretary.
Okay.
Well, while El Nino is looming, another low-pressure area is expected to bring quite an amount of rainfall in the Visayas and Mindanao. And there is now a moderate to high chance that this low-pressure area would develop into a weak tropical storm. As of 3 p.m., Pagasa last spotted the LPA 125 kilometers east of Puerto Princesa City, Palawan. It is embedded along the Intertropical Convergence Zone or ITCZ, affecting southern Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. The Weather Bureau said that if the LPA turns into a tropical depression, it will be named Betty, the second typhoon to hit the country in 2023. So, what kind of weather can we expect here in Metro Manila? Pagasa says it will be partly cloudy to cloudy skies with isolated rain showers or thunderstorms. Up next, COVID-19 cases continue to be in the rise in the country this past couple of days. Should we be alarmed? Well, we'll give you the government's response when the big story returns. Keep it here on One News.
This is still the big story here on One News.
Now let's talk about a trending topic as of late, the COVID-19 cases in the country. 19.7%. That's the positivity rate in Metro Manila alone, according to the Octa Research Group. Now, this is an uptick of 7% from last April 25. But given the number, the health department says there's no need to raise the alarm. Why? Well, for one, it's worth noting COVID-19 hospitalizations have remained low according to the Department of Health.
People are asking kung bakit dumami ang kaso. So it's still the same. Yun pong presence ng mga variants. Pangalawa po, yung mobility ng population natin ngayon. And the third would be the vulnerability of each person who gets sick. We don't need to panic. Ang tinitignan na natin kasi po ngayon yung healthcare system capacity. If it's manageable, then we are good.
Right, so also kanina, I think dinirect na ng DOH, no, na mag-prepare ng COVID wards. Having said that, hindi pa nga actually puno yung hospital utilization rate natin, mababa pa rin to. I think at this point, just like in other countries, like Japan, we should already consider this as endemic. And medyo ganun na rin yung tono no, ni DOH OIC Vergere.
Oo, kasi ibig sabihin naman kung mababa yung hospitalization rate, guys, diba? Ibig sabihin, COVID is not affecting us as bad.
Right.
Oo. Pero like hindi na masyadong, like life-threatening, no? Which is probably why, kasi generally, we see like when we see our friends or family, diba? Parang a lot of them are like, hindi na ako magmamask or bakit pa ako magpapabakuna? Parang normal na lang naman na trangkaso.
Punta natin yung bakuna. I think, syempre, ine-encourage pa rin yung pagbabakuna because probably isang reason kung ba't tayo umabot sa ganitong state na ganun-ganun na lang yung COVID is because nabakunahan na tayong lahat.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. Well,
in other news, guys, the Trade Department is ramping up its monitoring of vape shops and online sellers. The DTI and the Valenzuela LGU shut down 2 vape shops in the city and confiscated several products for violating the vape law. Some of the vape shops were located close to schools, while others had no business permit. Some of the vape products being sold also had no graphic health warnings, which is against the law. Valenzuela Mayor Wes Gatchalian said they're not trying to ban the sale of vape products, but it needs to be regulated.
We found out na marami pong mga backyard industry ang tawag ko dito. Tulad ito, nakikita nyo na ho ito. Ito po yung nangupahan lang sa isang maliit na sulok sa labas ng eskwelahan dahil alam nila, estudyante po ang pwede nilang biktima. Hindi naman po natin pinagbabawalan, wala naman pong masamang magbenta dahil ito po ay cessation product. Meaning po cessation product, ito po ang alternatibo para sa mga taong nalulod na sa pagsisigarilyo. Pero kailangan ho natin i-regulate.
Aside from conducting random checks, what else is the DTI doing to monitor the sale of vapes? Let's bring in Shyla Francisco to answer that. Shyla?
Chicky online sellers are not spared from this monitoring. The DTI says they've been checking online platforms. In fact, they've noticed and seen a lot of violations among online merchants. The DTI now reminds sellers that they need to verify their customers' age. Selling to persons below 18 years old is considered illegal. There also has to be health warnings in packaging. Fines for violators starts at 5,000 pesos to 100,000 pesos depending on the violation. Meanwhile, those with tax violations can incur fines of up to 5 million pesos and a possible jail time. Chicky?
Thanks for that report, Shyla Francisco.
After the break, Britain is getting ready to formally crown King Charles III. We'll talk about what to expect on the big day when we return. Keep it here on One News. still watching the big story here on One News. So, what else do we have for tonight? Yesterday, we talked about Metro Pacific earnings. Now, more on the corporate front. PLDT also reporting higher revenues in the first quarter. Its core income up 5% on the year. The telco said that service revenues were up 2%, driven by its data and broadband segments. The company's fintech arm Maya is also gaining momentum with 1.8 million bank customers as of March. PLDT says it's looking to move forward after its budget overrun issue. The company also welcomed new appointments, including Danny Yu, who serves as Chief Financial Officer, replacing Annabelle Chua, who recently opted for early retirement.
We got a lot of programs, a lot of processes, and even systems have to be in place, and we're putting the controls as we speak. In fact, very strict procurement process now, and monitoring of the approvals that we are doing. No?
Punta naman tayo sa sports. While the 2023 Southeast Asian Games opening is set tomorrow, several of the country's athletes have already begun competing in their respective sports. Over in men's volleyball, the Philippines started their campaign with a loss as they bowed to defending champions Indonesia in straight sets. Hindi pa naman tayo out of contention, but the game with Cambodia will determine the fate of Team Philippines, as a win will keep them in the hunt for a podium finish. Now moving on to women's football. Kagulat-gulat, but the Filipinas fell short to Myanmar after a late goal in the 89th minute. Medyo mabigat yung mga next games nila. The World Cup-bound Filipinas will next face Malaysia on Saturday before meeting defending champion Vietnam on May 9. But nevertheless, let's go ladies!
Yes.
While it hasn't been the best of starts for the country, may good news naman. We officially, have our first gold medal in the SEA Games. And this was courtesy of Kayla Napoles in Jiu-Jitsu Women's Newaza Nogi 52-kilogram event. She defeated hometown hero Jessica Khan in the finals earlier today. And prior to winning the gold, Napoles defeated her foes from Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam. We also have a bronze medal finish, courtesy of Harvey Navarro and Carl Navarro, also in Jiu-Jitsu men's duo event.
Nice.
Congratulations, Kyla, Harvey, and Carl, and of course to the rest of our athletes in Cambodia. Good luck to your games.
Yes, looking forward to more and more and more gold.
Sean and Riza, also something to watch out for this weekend. We'll be seeing the coronation of King Charles III. Charles has been heir apparent to the British throne for over 7 decades. But this Saturday, he will be formally crowned as the new head of the British monarchy. Preparations are underway over at Buckingham Palace and in Westminster Abbey, where King Charles by then will be crowned king. The coronation is expected to draw over 2,000 guests, including foreign dignitaries from over 200 countries.
Hindi ko nakuha yung invitasyon.
Ay, nako, okay lang. Si Bongbong Marcos at si First Lady, nakuha nila yung invitasyon. At tutuloy sila doon from America. Pero ako, excited lang ako dahil first time natin makawitness ng coronation.
Right.
Kasi super tagal nung reign ni Queen Elizabeth. And yung last time nag-coronation sila, guys, black and white yung footage. Ngayon, makikita natin siya in full color and probably in HD. So I'm really excited to watch a coronation. That will be on Saturday at 6 p.m. Manila time.
Ayan, may coverage po tayo dyan. Coverage. Okay, Sean, Riza, that's the show tonight.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.
Thank you and good night.